So welcome to this information webinar about communication engineering at Aalto University. So we go through some slides where we present the university, the communication engineering program, and how to apply to this program. And we are happy to take questions from all attendees at all times, so you can put questions in the Q&A session, or you can ask the floor and ask a question verbally, and then we try to answer as we best can. So we are now here, 3 persons representing university and trying to answer your question and explain what we are going. And you see our faces here on the slide, and you see also our faces in the Zoom meeting. So I'm Olav Tirkkonen. I'm the responsible teacher for this program and professor of communication theory at the university. Then we have Jukka Manner, who is a professor of networking in this university, and Outi Väisänen, who is the planning officer of this master's program. Sorry. And as I said, that we will start by going through an introduction of the university, then we will go through the introduction of the communication engineering major and discuss some career possibilities that arise once you have passed this major and got your master's degree. So what is Aalto University? It is a university that is a young university founded in 2010, but it is has an old root, so it is based on a merger of 3 universities in Finland. There was Helsinki University of Technology, University of Art and Design of Helsinki, and Helsinki School of Economics, all merged to Aalto University like 13 years ago. And since the merger, we have been building a common university, and we have also been getting, let's say, international recognition. So for example, here we can see that in the QS World University Rankings, they have a separate ranking for young universities that are less than 50 years old young, and in that listing we are number 9 in the world at the moment. And various other rankings, we have also been ranked pretty high up. So now, since the start of the university, we have now merged a multidisciplinary community, and here, like science and technology, is meeting business and art and design, basically. And the university is located in Espoo in Finland. It is close to the capital Helsinki, 10 kilometers from the center of the capital. And we have a campus here where basically all the university functions are here on the same campus. So all the 3 fields of technology, business, and arts and design are represented here on the campus. We have all university study facilities, laboratories, libraries, and so on the campus. And there is also a large amount of student union housing and other student union services here. There are services provided by third parties, cafes, bars, gyms. So basically, you can, if you start at the university, you may do something which we called otaantua in Finnish, which means that you are totally becoming a resident of Otaniemi and you never leave the place, because everything that you need is here on campus. So, as I said, here we can live, study, work, and spend free time. And let's say Finland as large has a good educational system. So it is known for having a high degree of basic education, and usually hereabouts we have a rather low hierarchies, and the university is also rather low hierarchy business. So let's say that between me and the president of the university, there are two persons, I would say. And I'm a typical teacher of the university. So that is the setting, something that there's the ambience is informal and low hierarchy, so you can approach people easily and without being afraid for some big bosses. Here, life is typically safe, and the quality of life is high, and people are rumored to be very happy around here. When it comes to languages, so it's easy to get along with English. It's well spoken both at the university and in Finland as a whole. So people do not have a need to really learn the local language. You can handle your studies and most of your life with English in principle. So if you decide to come here and you are elected, then we would like to welcome you to Finland. And as I said, that Finland is rumored to be a happy place. So according to UN indices, we are the happiest country in the world. And here it's a rather, happiness might be partially related to this equality, low hierarchy, safety, cleanliness. We have lots of nature, and also here on campus we have forests and the sea is here, so we can enjoy both the city and rural settings mostly all over the campus and in the city at large. We are well connected to the Nordic countries and the Europe. It's 3 hours from Paris, London, 1.5 hours to Berlin, I would say, not 3 hours. And this is part of the Nordic countries, and based here, if you come here from outside of Europe, you can use this as a basis to get to know most of the place. So now we will go over to the description of the main program, but do you have some questions at this stage related to the university at large and society at large? So if not, I would then let Jukka loose,
okay.
And he can start with the major.
Yeah, talking about the real kind of probably the real reason to come here, probably not the Finnish nature, but that's a bonus. So again, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are coming from my side. So as Olaf mentioned, so I'm a professor in networking technology, although I had a background in computer science. So I'm kind of a computer scientist who's lost in the networking area and the School of Electrical Engineering. So a weirdo in this place. But if you take the next slide. Yeah. So in a way, if you want to kind of classify or define what we do and what is different in the communications engineering and compared to, for example, classical computer science, then since we are part of the electrical engineering, then we have also one part of our work is related to bits and digitalization, software, and so forth. But the other part is also related to hardware, and in that sense, we are not just doing kind of theoretical work purely, but we also do implementations. We do a lot of work with real hardware. I'll be talking about our own 5G network, which is very how would I say it, very, very rare to have your own 5G network, for example, and we do a lot of this hardware related work here. So I guess the next slide is about, so another way to represent what we do, that if you consider the term information and communications technology, then we are kind of the C in that. So we do, on one hand, very theoretical work and low-level radio-related work, which is more in the domain of Olaf, and my domain is more on the higher levels of the stack, but also in, for example, web and mobile services and sustainability and things like that. So we do at the department and in our program a lot of computer science, but of course the main focus is on the communication side and future 5G, 6G, 7G, 8G, networks and clouds and you name it. So take a step forward. So the communications engineering, as mentioned, is on one hand part of this whole information and communications technology. And we also work on these communications networks, but also on radio topics and of course 5G today, and 6G is the next buzzword, and that's the next research topic in what could be the next evolution of mobile. But at the same time, we are also looking at for example, cloud computing, edge computing, various digital services, even user interfaces and things like that are done at the department. So it's actually a really wide-ranging research and teaching we do here. And of course, we want to see ourselves as a department that tries to change the world today. Now, of course, with any top-notch university, then education is also based on research. So we don't just talk about old theories and old things, but also try to bring state-of-the-art research results and our state-of-the-art understanding in the teaching, so that we evolve the teaching all the time as technologies and science evolves. We have a lot of labs and state-of-the-art equipment, so many courses have practical assignments and so forth, where there's even good hands-on experiments and exercises. One thing that is, I don't know if it's very, very, very unique in the world, but typically the master's thesis that you will be doing at the end of your 2-year program, it would be done at the industry. Some of them are done at the university research group, but the majority is done for the industry. So the industry likes to hire our future graduates to do a typical master thesis, which is like a six-month project, so a paid internship in the company. Of course, big companies like Nokia and Ericsson are here, but many others. So yeah, you get the kind of hands-on experience on working with industry topics, and then many students continue then their career after this thesis project with the same company. I guess that's typical, ULAB, right? Yeah, so what's the next slide? So yeah, about the 5G platform. So as I mentioned, that's something unique we have here. There, by the way, is Jose Costa Riquena, one of our research scientists here, so who's actually has the control of our 5G network. So actually something that we have our own license. So we have our own 5G network built together with Nokia. So we have state-of-the-art equipment and the whole radio part and backend part, and that allows us to do different types of research which might not be possible in any other university. But at the same time, we are also collaborating a lot with companies and startups and industry players. So fundamentally, as mentioned in earlier slides from Olaf, so the kind of oldest history of Aalto comes from the Helsinki University of Technology from over 150 years ago. And the history of the University of Technology is it's an engineering school, so kind of the #1 engineering school in Finland. So that's where the history comes from, that we have a very tight collaboration with the industry. And we do a lot of hands-on work and experimentation and so forth. What's next slide? So in terms of study topics, I already hinted that we do a lot. I mean, from theoretical and mathematical size, and whether it's wireless physical layer, whether it's AI-based, AI-driven, AI-related, to networks, transmitting bits through the network, and then giving a meaning to those bits. So whether they are part of wearable computing, some intelligence, smart buildings, user interfaces. So we do a lot of that. There's also part of our work is related to techno-economic questions that even if you are able to do something or some technology, does it make sense? Same question is often with green and sustainable ICT, that certain things might be possible to do, but do they make sense from the environmental sustainability, and or does some product, for example, or solution create more emissions that it's able to, for example, save in other directions? So of course, with 5G, that's often claimed that it's the greenest technology, but the future will show whether that is a fact or fiction. So that's about the study topic. So full range, and if let's say if I look at for example, master thesis is done at the department, that they really range from pretty much anything and everything related to computer science, information, communications technology. So there's a huge range of theses that can be done at the department towards the graduation. So I guess the next slide is simply a simple representation of the program structure. So 120 credits. So ECTS is the full program and planned for 2 years as usual for a master's degree. And one fourth, as you can see at the bottom, is the master thesis. So that's 30 credits. The master thesis typically is like 50-60 page report on a problem that the students solve. So usually the problems come from companies, from some technology area, but they might also come from research groups. And then on the top part, you see major studies. Half of the studies is actually the common courses, specialization courses. So the main topical area, so communications, computer science, telecommunications, cloud computing, what it interests you. And then there's 30 ECTS of elective. So there you have more freedom to study what you believe is most interesting for you. So at least I personally believe that you should have the freedom to study what is in your own interest the most. So there's a lot of freedom in the program to study what is the most interesting from your personal perspective. And all our students have very diverse backgrounds. So of course, it's good that everybody is able to study the things that interest them the most and also are the most motivating. Maybe that's about the program structure. Then in the specialization areas, this mentions kind of repetition on one hand on the study topics, but you can study, networking, network systems, as well as, in network systems, I would also include cloud computing, edge computing, a lot of AI, or I guess AI is part of everything nowadays. So everything seems to be AI nowadays. But also ubiquitous computing, where you can basically see computing embedded in everywhere and anywhere. But then of course, at the heart of the department is the wireless communication side, because a lot of our engineers in the past and even still today and in the future will be the baseline for Nokia's product development and Nokia's leadership in the area. So of course, a lot of our graduates are hired by Nokia, but also Ericsson, who had a big unit here in Finland. So that's where, of course, maybe the strongest history of the department comes, is the huge focus on wireless and radio communication. The next slide, please. So in terms of career opportunities, again, I kind of hinted that we have very close in the relationship with the industry. And in that sense, you could see that Aalto and the whole Otaniemi is kind of the Silicon Valley of Finland, because there's the big companies here around, and of course this is the biggest kind of metropolitan area. Even though we are not located in Helsinki, we are just I guess 10 minutes from subway from the downtown Helsinki to here, so it's just almost next door. And but definitely there's a lot of startups here. This is one of the biggest startup hubs in the whole Europe, is the Aalto University campus, and is the Helsinki area. And in that sense, yes, the companies, of course, will provide our students with summer jobs and trainee positions, and of course, the master thesis position is the kind of the end of the master's degree and that project that follows. So the Silicon Valley of Finland, if you will, this is where me and Ulla do our work. So something, yeah. So then I guess this is still about after the master's degree and master's phase, and of course some of our graduates still want to continue. So some are interested in a research career or simply enhancing your knowledge. I mean, of course, many of our doctors are not necessarily hired simply to do research, but the industry in Finland appreciates the high level of knowledge and skills that our doctors acquire doing the doctoral training and doing a doctoral dissertation. And many of our PhDs and doctors then join, other universities around the globe. But in general, when you are then graduating as a doctor from Aalto, then typically you are in a senior R&D position in major companies. But of course, there's many students also, form startups and in that sense have really international careers when they graduate. Well, maybe one point about the doctoral doctors is that, of course, some of them do it here in research group, like Olaf's research group or mine. And there's, I think, like 20 professors in our department, give or take. So we have a lot of researchers, but also some of those are actually working in the industry, like Ericsson or Nokia, and doing actually, or I think I have actually a couple of doctoral students working at Telia, so a mobile operator, and doing the research work as part of their daily work in the company. So it's also possible to do a doctorate while you are still employed in a company, when you are able to do something else than just the next quarter's earnings, but they're doing something long term and research like. So that's a good thing to note here. Was that the last slide? Okay, yeah. In terms of doctoral research, so let's say the doctoral research can be on one hand, of course, incremental, or it can be looked at. We can look at radical new topics. Typically, maybe the radical is more of a research of kind of university research, and then the incremental is typically more closer to companies and industry. But the topics that, for example, our doctors are working on, or future or graduate doctors and future doctors, can be almost anything in the ICT area. I mean, from 6G and for example, sustainable ICT to various mobile services, AR, VR, machine learning, mathematical questions, physical layers in radios, and all sorts of topics. So I don't think that we have any kind of limitation, as long as you are not necessarily working on some chemistry or wood construction, and that wouldn't make sense in our department. But apart from that, if it has something to do with bits moving or bits doing something, then usually that's the topic that our department is working. And as mentioned earlier, some of those are kind of also techno-economic side. So for example, I have one student who's just applying in our doctoral program, and he has a techno-economics direction. So wants to understand business implications in the mobile world. Then I guess then we'll switch to another speaker. So that was about the program and the study program. But anyway, you have the Q&A box there in Zoom, so you can drop in questions and we can answer at the end of the webinar if something comes to your mind. Thanks.
Okay, so next there's some slides about the student life and then about the admissions. So first about the student life in Aalto. So as already mentioned, we are here in Espoo in Otaniemi, and all the studies are here in the Otaniemi campus, which is quite a special place. And also the Finnish student life is very vivid. So there's a lot of different kind of events and traditions that are part of the student's life. So you can do also a lot of other things than study here. Then everyone who works or studies at Aalto is a member of Aalto community. And then for students, there are a lot of hobbies. There are many associations around the campus, I think more than 200, which are, for example, focused on sports or music or theater or culture or internationality. So there's something for everybody. And as already mentioned, we are really close to Helsinki. So we are in the Helsinki metropolitan area. So this is a really nice place for students to study and live. And then on the next slide, we have some information about the student benefits. So this is also a quite nice thing about studying in Finland. So we have all different kind of student discounts. So for example, the lunch is pretty cheap. So we have discounts in the lunch and then in the public transport, then in the sports, stores, museums and more. And then we have specific housing for students, and more information about that can be found on our website, but we have really affordable options for the housing for students. And then we also have a student healthcare. So we have the Finnish Student Health Services, which provides general and dental healthcare for university students. And then also it's really affordable to do all kind of sports in the Helsinki and Espoo area through this Unisport. They offer a lot of different possibilities. And on the next slide, we have about the admissions. So all the information concerning the admission to this program and other master's programs at Aalto can be found on this website. The link is on the slides. And we have the application period once a year. And the next one will start at the end of this month and end in the beginning of January. And from the website, you can find all the application instructions. So we have the general application instructions for all Aalto programs, and then we have the specific instructions also to the communications engineering. Then on the website, you can also find information about the tuition fees and scholarships, and yeah, all the admission requirements are also there. And then if you have any questions concerning the admission, so you can contact our admissions office by email. So that was my part of the presentation, and I think now it's time for the questions.
Thank you, Jukka and Outi. Now we turn the attention to our audience participants. Do you have any questions that come into mind at this stage?
Yeah, we are here to help and answer if you have anything you are wondering. So just shoot if anything comes to your mind at this stage. Someone raised a hand. You want to use the mic or write in the chat?
So please, Dare, can you are free to speak?
Is the mic allowed, or do you need to write it in the Q&A box?
Technical support here. I tried to allow speaking if you raise hand, but our attendee is not speaking, so I suggest you write in the chat or the Q&A, so it's easier to get your question correctly and get you a good answer.
So you have a question about applying for a scholarship. So question was that what is more important for applying for scholarships apart from average points? Well, I'm not personally an expert on the scholarships and how those are decided and what's the grading of those.
but I would say that apart from average point, there is nothing. That's
Yeah, right. Yeah.
that is basically precisely the points that you are, in some sense, average points. So we are evaluating the student application, and that evaluation, it's a GPA. It's the basically you can find all that information in the application pages at what are evaluation based on. So it is a GPA. It is the suitability of the background to the program. It is the recognition of the bachelor program that the student is coming from, and basically also the let's say the motivation of the student to come to this program. Is all of these are then evaluated, and then there is one point that is gathered from those. So basically, apart from GPA, we have the suitability of the previous studies, the recognition of the bachelor program, the motivation of the student to come. So those are evaluated.
Yeah, I can add that I added to the chat the link to our program-specific evaluation criteria, so you can find all these different areas that are evaluated through that site.
So there was another questions about for the an advice on the application. So what kind of application documents play a role, and the process of application assessment? I guess Olav already answered that. But
yeah, well, so then we can say that I think that when you apply, there are a certain set of documents that are compulsory. So you have to give a transcript of your studies, and then you have to send let's say, how do you say, the
degree certificate,
degree certificate, and so on. But it's also, let's say, that those non-voluntary, non-compulsory part, there are possible to send. It's like a motivation letter and a CV as such. They are also good to send. Let's say that then somehow, if you think that the question is that what kind of students would we like to have, so we would like to have good and motivated students, right? so then basically somehow, based on what you are sending, we should be able to evaluate that this is a good and motivated student. And for the latter, let's say the non-compulsory things that you can add to the application, but which are not necessary compulsory, they are can be used as like show your motivation to why you are coming here, and do you, let's say, from what you are planning to do, is this a correct place for you to come? Because if it is something that you would really not, you would like to do something else, then perhaps you are not so motivated to study here and such things.
Yeah, and at the end, I mean, we also kind of from the motivation, but we also want to understand the skills. So, for example, if I just comment on past application, we might have someone who had a background in chemistry and wants to come to us. So obviously there's no bachelor courses in that individual's program. So there's no background knowledge, there's no kind of skills in that area. So it would be very difficult to take these master's level advanced courses if there's no kind of baseline knowledge in the area. So that's why we are on one hand evaluating the background of the student. And then, of course, GPA is one thing, but also what the student studied. For example, let's say they, student did, purely, I don't know, high power, electronics or something like that. And there's, one course on computer science and no courses on any networking or radio or communication topics. And we would probably not give very high grades to a student who doesn't have kind of some communications, computer science background in the bachelor's degree. But then also there might be students who, for example, don't have a very high GPA, but then, for example, have worked in the area, have done, I don't know, open source programs and done lot of activities outside of the studies, and that might also give good points in the sense that it shows that the student has done more than just the basic university courses. So in that sense, it's not the black and white that the selection process, but we try to grade and evaluate the students. And at the end, for us, it's important to try to find students who actually graduate and have the skills to be able to graduate. So that's why we are kind of also in the sense not being picky, but trying to estimate that who can make through our program. It's not terribly hard, but if you don't have the background knowledge, then it might be too hard to actually pass the courses. Well, now there's a lot of questions coming more even.
So there's the question about the internship opportunities and whether you can go to an off-campus company to do the graduation project. So there are internship opportunities. So there are internships available in some companies, and there are internships which you can then apply for. And as then Jukka was saying, that the typical way to do the graduation project or the master thesis is to do that in the industry. So then it is possible to go to an off-campus company to do the master thesis, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely,
yes.
yes.
You can leave off the campus. This is not like a closed area where you have walls and you can't leave. But in that sense, of course, you can also live outside of the campus. That's not forbidden in any way. Then there was a question about having challenges with the IELTS, language, or is that a language certificate?
That's a difficult question.
Later. I mean,
Outi, what do you say?
Well, it is said that the strict deadline for providing all the application documents it's a week after the application period closes, so it's in January 9th this year. So language test result is one of those documents that needs to be provided by then, but unfortunately I'm not now aware of this situation, but you might type an email to this admissions@aalto.fi and get more specific instructions from there. But basically the deadline for each application document is strict.
Then there's a question about someone having a mechanical engineering degree and 3 years work in the field of software. I'm an interested person, curious about prospect. Yeah, so for example, now this example that whoever here wrote, but now, so you have a mechanical engineering degree, but then you have work experience in software development. So that, which is of course practical knowledge and in that sense valuable from the industry perspective. Now, if you think about then the courses, that how can we evaluate your kind of background and your theoretical knowledge on many areas in math, in computer science, programming, computer engineering, potentially electronics. So I mean, having software development skills is one thing, but then of course many of our courses are highly, some of them are mathematical, some of them require strong knowledge in, for example, networking, network stacks, network protocols, flow control, congestion control, routing algorithms, things like that. So if you don't have any of that or very limited of that in your bachelor's degree, then the fear is that then the master's program will be very, very difficult to go through, because you would need to then take a lot of bachelor's courses kind of to fill that missing theoretical knowledge. I guess Olav has something to add.
Yeah, well, I would say that basically if you have a degree in mechanical engineering, bachelor degree mechanical engineering, then we would assume that your background in mathematics, physics, and basic sciences is sufficient. And then you would clearly have to provide this, let's say, document a little bit this software development skills that you have accumulated during your work experience. in your CV and the motivation letter, so we can take those into account,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That
Because we don't see
then
the
we can,
courses then
because
either.
then from the transcript, just looking at the transcript, we would see that you don't have a really sufficient background for this master program. But then if you now fill in with your CV and your motivation letters that you have accumulated this background in software engineering, software development, that can be then acts as a plus for you. And then we understand that okay, you have a good background in this part of the program at least. So that is a typical example of a situation where you should work not only send the transcript, but you should work on writing the motivation letter and the CV where these things come forth. And then you should reaching out to the professors within the department is it does not change the situation in a way, because let's say the application papers then eventually come to our table nevertheless, and then we ever look at what you have written in the application, and then based on that we then decide whether the background is sufficient or not. Does that somehow answer your question?
It's difficult for us to kind of just by reading the papers, then of course, try to figure out that if the person has enough background and enough skills to make it through our courses. So of course we can possibly be interviewing, personally every candidate. So that's why we just have to rely on documents and papers we see from students and somehow be able to estimate who of these applicants would make it up to the masters and actually graduate as a master in our area. Then there's a question about, I guess, is Finnish necessary for international students to work or study here? No. I mean, Finland, you can imagine that there's not too many people who speak Finnish. So in that sense, we Finns have to kind of be flexible in understanding and supporting other languages. And of course, English is the language that most people probably talk. So of course you can handle probably everything and anything in Finland in English. So Finland and Aalto University are very international. So pretty much all the services you can think of are available also in English language. Probably not other languages than English, Swedish, and Finnish. So other languages might not work. But that was, I guess, mentioned earlier today. If you missed that, but definitely, we understand that there's not too many people who can decrypt the Finnish language on this planet. So you can use English, and our education anyway is in English for the master's degree. Anything else? I think that's the questions. So I guess you can anyway, contact the study office and for further questions. And still one question: is it possible to study remasters in Aalto? What is remasters?
Does it mean that the second degree?
Can you maybe elaborate what you mean by remasters?
So a second degree.
Degree.
Yeah. It is possible, yes.
Yeah.
So it is in the same way, let's say that your eligibility for the studies is considered, that the suitability of the background and so on, and if you have a master study, let's say in somehow a field which provides a good background for communication engineering studies, then you are taken as an eligible applicant.
Yeah. Yeah, we have, I guess, very few of those, if I remember, in the past who had already a master's degree, but that's not a limiting factor as long as the background is enough for our master's degree, right? Anything else that comes to your mind? Yeah, thank you for the question. So do we adjourn for the day?
First, I would like to, as a last point, show that here is a coffee cup that you might have noticed that I was drinking coffee, and there is a reason for that. That Finland is a country in the world where the coffee consumption is per capita is the highest in the world. So we are drinking a lot of coffee.
You don't need to. That's no problem.
You don't need
to become a coffee drinker if you drink rather tea. That's fine. We appreciate also people who don't drink coffee. Don't worry.
But if there are no more questions, then we call it a day.
Yeah.
You are free to approach us also by email if you get some questions that you want answers to. And hope you see you soon here.
Yeah. So have a great day from my side.